So thanks for being with us today. My name is Pam Frank. I am the CEO of ChargEVC. We have got some really exciting news to share, eagerly anticipated, and we've been working towards this day for the last several years. So ChargEVC works to electrify our transportation sector. We have many, many different voices around this table, some of whom are here today with us. In January of 2018, we published our first study on light-duty vehicles, and today we will be presenting the other half, a complete picture that looks at everything on our roads, including the medium and heavy-duty segment, the trucks, as you can see behind me, the buses, and other things with wheels. That's my technical term. I want to thank and introduce our host. Standing to the left of me, Mayor Steve Fulop, who's been the mayor of Jersey City since 2013. Now, I have a few former mayors among my friends, and I know it's really hard to be a mayor. Besides tending to all the details that ensure essential services are provided in a way that serve the local needs of the residents here, that's well over 250,000 people, he relentlessly looks forward to how the city can do things better and how the city can do things differently. That's what leaders do. Jersey City is one of the first cities with full electric vehicles in its transportation fleet. Under his leadership, there have been many firsts. So, without further ado, Mayor Steve Fulop.
Thank you, Pam. I want to say a couple thank yous to our team here. To my right, we have our business administrator, Brian Platt, and we have our innovation team, Melissa, Kate from our sustainability team, Barca from our transportation team. There's a lot of people involved in improving the transportation infrastructure here in Jersey City, and we pride ourselves on being a leader on that front. A couple of years ago, we made a commitment that we're going to transform Jersey City in big ways and small ways, and one of the things that we can make a lasting difference in is by simply changing our fleet of vehicles, which is several thousand. And over the last couple of years, we've slowly started to do that, from changing and purchasing 10% of our fleet to be electric in the first phase, from moving police cars from traditional gas to electric, to buying larger trucks and garbage trucks that are fully electric. The reason we've done this is we do feel that everybody can have an impact in leaving our world a better place, but we also recognize that it's a real public health issue. In densely populated areas like Jersey City, we see that areas that are the more vulnerable and closer to highways and major transportation corridors, we see larger cases of asthma, respiratory diseases, all sort of ailments that are largely attributed to the medium and heavy sized trucks and the diesel fumes coming from them. So we're excited to be a partner with ChargEVC. We're excited to help push in Trenton legislation that will move more and more vehicles to be electric vehicles via requirements. We think that is important for the future of New Jersey and Jersey City. And I would just conclude by saying that the governor has been a thought leader on the transportation front, on the climate front, and he's done a lot of good things. He's made a commitment to moving more towards wind, and he's been vocal on this issue, and we commend him, and we look forward to being a partner with him on the environmental front here with moving vehicles to the electric front. So thank you, Pam. Thank you, ChargEVC. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to introduce Mark Warner. Mark Warner is a colleague of mine. He's vice president at Gable Associates, and he's also served as the lead investigator of the study that's being published today. In addition to orchestrating all the analysis that's gone into this work, he's also collaborated with all the ChargEVC members and has had many, many discussions with state agency personnel. This has been a very collaborative exercise, and a really important report that establishes some important facts that are going to inform conversations going forward. So, Mark Warner.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank our host, Jersey City, and Mayor Fulop. Thank you for having us here this morning. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the study that we're releasing today. But before I do that, I want to maybe give you some context. These vehicles behind me, these electric cars and trucks, are a massively transformative change. Think about it, 3 of the largest industries on the planet all intersect when you start talking about electric vehicles. The manufacture of cars and trucks, the petroleum industry, and the electricity industry. All 3 of those huge industries are going to be fundamentally different in 20 years than they are today because of these vehicles behind me. So what we've been doing with this study is to try and really explore in a very quantitative way what those impacts are in a way that can then help guide this next phase of conversation about what we can do to really help make this market happen. So, as Pam mentioned, 2.5 years ago, we published the very first study in New Jersey about electric vehicles. We focused on the 6 million light-duty vehicles because that was something we could really get our hands around. The day after we published that study, we started on the next one, and that 2.5 years worth of work is what we're going to be releasing today. To do that, what was different, as Pam mentioned, is that we're now looking at the full market, all the vehicles on the road, not just light duty, but medium and heavy duty diesel vehicles as well. And it turns out that's a much more complete and much more challenging thing to take on. We needed to develop tools to figure out how fast these different kinds of vehicles could electrify over time. We developed tools to help estimate how much charging infrastructure was going to be needed and how that would affect the rate at which this electrification happens. And we had to develop new tools that would allow us to model, as the mayor was talking about, the special characteristics of the emissions that come from diesel trucks and medium duty vehicles. So when we did that, we've ended up with some very striking conclusions. First of all, it sort of reaffirmed what we had found in our first study, but bigger. When you look at the full market and you add in all the diesel vehicles, all the impacts become much more significant. And let me just highlight 3 of them. First of all, we're going to save a ton of money. The thing to know for your next cocktail party is that it costs about half as much to fuel a vehicle with electricity compared with using a petroleum fuel. So that translates, we spend about $15 billion a year in New Jersey on fuel. So that's approximately $7 billion that we're going to save because we're now fueling with electricity. Secondly, we looked at what this transition would look like between now and 2050. And if you add up what we would spend buying cars and buying fuel and doing maintenance, if we just continued to buy the internal combustion engines that we're used to and compare that with instead buying electric vehicles on the schedule that we thought made sense, we save a ton of money. It turns out if you add that up between now and 2050, we would actually spend about $130 billion less going with electric vehicles than if we just kept doing what we're already doing. So there's a massive amount of money to be saved by transitioning to these new vehicles compared to what we already know today. The second big thing is that there are massive emission reductions. First of all, locally, everywhere these vehicles are traveling on the roads, the emissions go to 0. There's basically no emissions from the tailpipe from any of these vehicles behind me. So in the communities, as the mayor was mentioning, in the communities where these vehicles travel, there's a massive improvement in the air quality. So the key thing from that is that vehicle electrification is really a public health initiative. And when we think about it that way, it provides the right context for how to prioritize the policies and market frameworks in order to make this happen. When we think about CO2, one of the major greenhouse gases, every electrically fueled mile is about 75% cleaner than a gasoline or diesel fueled mile. When you look at criteria pollutants like NO2, which is a very harmful pollutant for local communities, that reduces by about 85%. And that's even after we do the net calculation. We know the emissions go to 0 at the tailpipe, but they go up at the power plant in order to provide that electricity. What this study does is when you do that math very carefully, the net impact is somewhere between 75 and 85%. So we're able to show in this study that once we start adding, especially these diesel vehicles, it becomes more clear that vehicle electrification is really a huge public health initiative, and that's especially important for many of our overburdened communities that tend to be right where these vehicles travel. The third one, and this is kind of a little bit of a sleeper, A lot of people don't realize that if we displace petroleum use with electricity, obviously we're going to be using a lot more electricity. And when you figure that out, the impact is that everybody's electricity rates go down. If you use a machine a lot more, if the utilization goes up, the costs go down. So as people are buying these electric vehicles and using electricity to charge them, everybody's electricity rates will go down as a result. So we're going to save a ton of money on the vehicles themselves. We're going to make massive improvements in air quality, both for greenhouse gas purposes and for public health. And we're going to save everybody money on their electricity bills. And when you figure all that out between now and 2050, it's billions of dollars of net benefit. What the study does is it takes a very comprehensive look at all the costs that are going to go along with electrification and all the benefits that are going to come out of electrification, and looks at the net balance. And when you do that math, the benefits are somewhere between 3 and 4 times the costs. So we're going to come out way ahead compared to whatever we have to invest. The other key conclusions from the study are that, especially once you're looking at these diesel vehicles, there are a lot of different flavors of these cars. There's fire trucks and garbage trucks and the 18-wheelers on the interstate. Some of these vehicles are ready to electrify today by evidence of the classes of vehicles right behind me. Garbage trucks, some applications for electric buses, some drayage applications, which is especially important here at the ports. Those vehicles are very close to being competitive and offer an operating cost savings advantage that fleet operators are very sensitive to. We also identified that some other segments, like school buses, we'd really love to be putting our kids into cleaner buses every day, but that segment is very challenged economically. Also, if we want to take a vehicle like that and use it for long-haul applications, going from here to Chicago, we have some work to do because we need to get that very high-powered charging infrastructure built along the interstates. So the study is going to identify which of these diesel vehicles are really ready to electrify and which ones need more work. So the bottom line is that there's good public benefit in encouraging electrification across the full market. We're going to come out way ahead in terms of money and in terms of emissions and in terms of improving some of the equity issues for our overburdened communities. But it's not going to happen by itself. We also identify some of the barriers to making all those good things that I talked about happen, and we laid out an initial marker, if you will, for the next generation plan on what we can do to make all this happen. When we did the first study 2.5 years ago, that was sort of the starting point for a lot of good work that's been done to really help electric vehicles happen for the light duty segments. And we're hopeful that the study we're releasing today will be the starting gun on the next conversation for doing the same for the entire market. So with that, thank you, Pam at ChargEVC. Thank you, Mayor, for having us here today. And we're very glad you came out, and we'll be publishing the study on the website by the end of the day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was a massive amount of work that went into this, and we're very appreciative to finally start getting the facts out. I want to bring up as our final speaker Tanisha Gardner. Tanisha is an environmental advocate. She's a mom. She's got 3 kids, 3 girls. She's a resident of Newark's Ironbound, which is the East Side Newark neighborhood that abuts the Passaic River and an industrial corridor that is adjacent to our port. Tanisha fights for clean air for the health and well-being of her family, something that no one should ever really have to fight for, but she's doing it. So Tanisha, please come up.
Good morning, everyone. One, I want to thank God for being here, because without God, none of this would be possible. We're living in trying times. Like she just mentioned, I live in the city of Newark, and I live in the Ironbound, which is an environmental justice community deemed by the DEP and the EPA. And we have many health factors and health hazards, especially in the Ironbound, that's also connected to Jersey City. Air is air. No matter what part of the city you live in, it still affects us all. It affects the employees, it affects the employer, it affects everything from our money, how we budget our money, how much that we have to spend time with our families. So I'm grateful for this because this is a start. So one thing I want to say is that I guess, to do a collaboration with the city of Newark to bring the fleets over there too, because it's a big impact, especially coming from the ports. So we have over thousands of different trucks that comes through our communities each and every day with diesels that affects the air. And we also have, for instance, we have Covanta, which is the incinerator that pollutes in the air also. We also have Newark Energy. So just imagining all these community impacts that affects our community. So the way we could start is start by dealing with the trucks. That's one issue. And also with the cars, that's another issue. And also with, I guess, mobility, because people have to travel. The city of Newark is big because it deals with the seaport, and it also has the airport, and it also has the transit. So just imagine if we could do zero emissions with that to be able to electrify the port. So this is very important. We definitely need to work together and be able to create policies that's going to be able to make game changes, especially for our children and the legacies of our children, so they could be able to live a clean life and breathe healthy, and especially for our seniors, because there's a lot of seniors that is dealing with a lot of underlying health conditions. And where do we start? I understand sometimes, yes, it's about the money, so now maybe we could invest in the stock market on a different way by dealing with electricity. And so it's many ways and many factors, especially if we want to get into the technology part, that we'll be able to educate our children. We'll be able to educate and create a new system of different ways that we can be able to solve these problems. So I just want to thank you for today, and let's keep the fight going. And I want to thank you again, Mayor.
Tanisha, thank you. Just to drive home, location. Our own DEP estimates that the diesel particulate levels that surround the port are 1,000 times greater than levels that are considered safer to breathe. I don't have that air where I live in Mercer County. You have that air where you live, and that's extremely unfair. We all need to work together, and there's no excuse to wait on this. We hear buzzwords like environmental justice community, overburdened communities. Well, thank you, Tanisha, because you put a face to what it's like to live in those communities every day and to have to fight for the right to breathe clean air.